Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Ms. De La Rosa. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely hope everyone's doing great today.
Yes, thank you. We will get started in 5 minutes.
Mr. James Gill, could you do an audio check, please, sir?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Thanks.
I hear you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear my audio?
Yes, we can. Member De La Rosa.
Perfect. Thank you. My AirPods weren't working.
Good evening. We are ready to begin our October 29th board meeting. This is Phoenix Elementary School District. Welcome to our October 29th meeting. It is 5:15 and I call this meeting to order. And we will start off with a tribal land acknowledgement. In partnership with the tribes who called Phoenix their home first, we acknowledge and respect the land our schools are built on. We commit to being a strong partner with any and all tribal nations who entrust their children to our schools. We are grateful and honored to be partners. May I get a roll call?
Good evening. Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Here.
Mr. Reginal Carrillo, Ms. Erica De La Rosa,
Here.
Dr. Alicia Vink, and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Present.
Thank you.
With that, we have a quorum to continue our meeting, and I invite you to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic. And I can't see you. Do we have a recommendation from administration about the agenda?
Administration recommends that you accept the agenda as it stands.
Thank you. With that, I motion that we adopt the agenda as is.
This is Carmen Trujillo. I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Ms. Erica De La Rosa,
Aye.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye.
Thank you.
With that, we're moving on to our current event summary. We will kick it off with our superintendent's report. Dr. Gonzalez.
Good evening, Madam President, our board members, our cabinet and community and audience that is listening. As we wrap up the month of October, I'm proud to share with our community that everyone has been present and participating in our visioning meetings around the district, helping us to prioritize future programming for our schools. We have another one this Saturday morning at 9 o'clock at Dunbar. Breakfast will be available, so we hope you will join us. This weekend, we also have a gardening event at Edison, helping to create green space and a garden for our youngest learners. Thanks to Sprouts, who is donating a day of service, we're going to spend the morning building sheds, filling planter boxes, creating a sensory area for our medically fragile students at Edison. And I also want to be sure that we celebrate two critical groups in our district that were recognized in the month of October. Thank you to our wonderful school custodians and to our school principals. Thank you for ensuring our children are in schools that are safe and clean and that they have engaging places to learn and grow. Earlier this week, I had a special person shadowing me, Ms. Delina Galindo, a Dorrance scholar at ASU who's studying to become a teacher, spent a good part of the day with me welcoming guests to our governing board room, visiting schools, and meeting with the City of Phoenix's economic office. She's an alumnus of Herrera and is currently completing observations at Magnet, but she's eager to come back to Phoenix #1 as a kindergarten teacher as soon as she finishes her academics. We wish her continued success as she completes her degree and look forward to having her join us again. Last week, President Joe Biden apologized for a U.S. policy that separated indigenous children and forced them to attend boarding schools. This has special significance to those of us in Phoenix, since Phoenix Indian School was one of the boarding schools that was operating from 1891 to 1990. Tonight, I'm very proud to highlight the work of our Indian Education Program led by Mrs. Ashley King and Ms. Melanie Begay, and our Indian Education Parent Committee, who are connecting students and their families to the rich cultural traditions that were lost to so many during this time period. We have a sticker for each of our board members and a special gift that was picked out by our Education Parent Committee. And this is in remembrance of the children who were at our boarding schools and the work that we're doing currently to support all of our learners, but in particular, connecting our American Indian students to their cultural traditions. And that concludes my comments for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. That was all very important information to share. So thank you for honoring our past. Moving on to board members' reports. Do we have any? Okay, I did have a couple to share. I was also part of Miss what's her name? Delina's visit. We were able to visit Kenilworth, Capitol, and Dunbar, and it was great to see our students and to be able to see all the hard work that our staff is doing at our campuses. At Capitol, we have a new shade structure that looked very beautiful and provided plenty of shade. So thank you. That was an exciting visit. And then last Friday, I was also able to volunteer at the GAIN event that the city hosts over at Edison Park. It was a great turnout. We had a lot of fun. It was still pretty warm outside, but the raffle prizes were a hit, and that was what I was in charge of. So I was inundated with lots of interested people. And then yesterday, I was able to attend the Charrettes at Herd. So thank you to everyone that was in attendance, to staff, and to our participants. We left with a lot of good information, and I look forward to Saturdays. So thank you. Moving on to our student outcome focused governance. If you are new to our board meeting and to our district, in September of 2022, the board had adopted a student outcome focused governance framework, and we've been implementing it last school year, and we are well underway for our second academic year. And with that, we believe that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Or said differently, when placed in the context of governing, patterns of behavior that are exhibited in the boardroom can reasonably be expected to be found paralleled in the classroom. This is why it's important for our governing board to show and model what the behavior is that we expect throughout the district. And so with that, this is an overview of what that governance model looks like. The intention of the governance framework is to translate existing research and the collective experience of dozens of board members and superintendents into a set of tools that boards can use to identify what's working and what's not working, as well as to track progress along their journey toward improving student outcomes. So with that, our governance model has 6 concepts, competencies. We start off with our vision and goals, and that is the responsibility of the board to carry out the vision of the community. Our school systems exist to increase what students know and are able to do. Second, we have our values and guardrails. In governing, board members represent the vision and values of the community, and they rely on the superintendent to determine how to accomplish that vision while honoring the values. Number 3, we have our monitoring and accountability. Boards may adopt goals, but the effective use of time monitoring the goals are a skill the board needs to develop in order to hold the educational system accountable. Then we move into communication and collaboration. The board will lead with transparency and include stakeholders in the pursuit of the goals. Next, we have our unity and trust, and the board would lead with one voice in its pursuit of the goals. And last is the continuous improvement. The board must be dedicated to the cycle of continuous improvement by paying attention to what's working and what's not working. And that is what we'll cover today. We have 2 progress monitoring reports that we will cover. And our next slide is our goals. So if you're in the boardroom with us, you can see the goals on our podium, in our boardroom. They're on the screen if you're watching at home. And you can see that we've decided on 5 goals. The first 2 goals are around our early childhood literacy and mathematics. As you can see, we've set some percentage. We have a long ways to go, but we know it's what our students and our staff are capable of. Our third goal is focused on our English language learners. And our last two goals are middle school literacy and mathematics. And next, we are moving on to superintendent guardrails. While the whole system is focused on the goals, and that is the achievement part of what the school system is responsible for, we also have guardrails that help the superintendent also focus on other matters that are important to the school district. As you can see, we want to operate with reciprocal and effective communication between all stakeholders and staff. Number two, we want to be able to foster a trusting and collaborative environment by respecting that we are all human first and that we are respectful of one another when we see each other as humans. And the third one is around operating with the intention of making sure that we are recruiting the right staff, providing those working conditions to keep and retain our staff, and we want to make sure that they are reflective of the community that they are serving. Number four is to not allow any site to operate without a budget that is allocated equitably. And last, we want to make sure that we are focused on a community plan to mitigate some of the enrollment barriers that our community might face as they are trying to enroll in some of our schools. And so not only does the superintendent have guardrails, we also have guardrails for our board members. Today, we will be discussing number two, but essentially the guardrails for the board, and these are commitments on behalf of the board, is to not interfere with the day-to-day operations and not seem to direct staff. Our second is, you'll be hearing more of today, is that we are not spending less than 50% of our time focusing on student outcomes. Number three, we will not deviate from the board's operating procedures. Number four, we will not negate newly elected board members from experiencing a quality onboarding process. And last, we will not focus on the inputs and outputs at the expense of student outcomes. And with that, I will pass it over to Dr. Gonzalez that will kick us off on our discussion on board interim goal number two.
Thank you, Madam President. Welcome, everyone, again. We are looking forward to going over progress monitoring goal 2. So you can see here, goal number 2 is the percent of third grade students with a pass rate in mathematics as per the AASA, which is our state assessment, will increase from 29% on August of 2023 to 54% by August of 2028. And if we look at the next slide, you can see where this board goal comes from. You can see the progress where we started in 2021 and where we are currently. As a reminder, in 2022, we were at 28%. We moved up in 2023, 1%. We were stagnant last year in 2024. Our goal is that by 2025, we are going to hit that 35 mark for our third grade students. And I'll invite Dr. Lloyd to talk about how we set the goals and the different areas that we want to focus on as we continue with this work.
Hello, President Bueno, members of the board and community. Thank you for having me. So the target for this year was just a simple division. I looked at, because our goal is to get to 54% by 2028. So I divided those years into equal segments. We would need a 6-point increase from 29 to 35% for this year to reach our target. In terms of the targets in the tables that we have, those were based on where our students have scored and where we need to be with each group to be able to reach that target of the 35%. It's different for each group because different groups have different starting places based on the data that we currently have available to us. And so they were set by group using historical data to help us understand where we likely will be able to make those gains depending on the different groups. And we found, in terms of areas to focus, we have a lot of needs with our English language, our students learning academic English language, which is all of our students, but especially those that receive services, and then also students who receive exceptional education services, and making sure that they receive the accommodations and the scaffolds that they need to be successful. The other area obviously is in our tier 1 instruction, which is that's what we give to our students the majority of the day. For 80% or more of the time, they should be in tier 1 instruction, and then they should receive some additional supports as needed, based on their level of need. And we know with a solid tier 1 instruction, that will benefit the majority of the students. But in that tier 1, we have to make sure to focus on what are, how do we help each group of students and each student be able to access grade level skills and knowledge that they need to be successful. So that's where you see what we're focusing on more in our plans for focus is things that will help our instruction and be able to support, especially this grade of students with being able to gain conceptual knowledge through the use of manipulatives, through small groups, and then being able to use a customized intervention tool as well to help them be successful.
Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. So as we move to the next slide, this is our current first grade students. And if you will recall, we identified 3 focus schools who were performing below our below all the other schools. And so they were identified as focus schools, recognizing that that meant we have to put more resources and focus to that school to help them rise higher than their colleagues in order for us to meet our goals. So as we look at goal 1 or grade 1, excuse me, interim goal 2.1, the focus schools are Dunbar, Emerson, and Lowell, and we're working to increase the average score for those scores from 10% to 19% by 2026. Note this is a 2-year goal. And so when you look in the far right column, you see the winter target for 24-25. You'll also remember that we are now using our winter benchmark data as our touch point to understand where students are, because that gives us time for strong interventions from winter to springtime when they will take their final assessment for the year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ailshire, who will talk a little bit about what's working and what needs more attention. And after we look at goal 2 and goal 2.2, we'll be able to hear from one of our principals, Emerson, Mr. Lodado, who's working in this area in particular to talk about an answer to President Bueno's question submitted earlier.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. President Bueno, happy birthday. Vice President Trujillo, to our community and cabinet, thank you so much. I want to kind of take one step back before I take a step forward and go back to what Dr. Lloyd was talking about the power of tier 1 instruction, right? So when we talk about these various subgroups of English language learners or emerging bilingual students and our students in the Exceptional Student Services Program, we really want to emphasize that none of these things are in isolation, right? So if we're focusing really strongly on tier 1 instruction, which I think you're going to hear from our principals, that's really is the focus on what everyone is doing and what everyone is, that has a ripple effect to all of those subgroups and more importantly, to all of our students. So any of the things that I'm talking about in here are really these really important tier 1 strategies that we're really working to train, coach, support, and really monitor those inputs. One of the things that we really came away with in our conference in Dallas just this past week was actually 2 weeks ago, was the real need of, we've done a phenomenal job of measuring our outcomes. We need to get really clear on measuring our inputs and what those are as we go in. And so that's something that we at the CNI department have been really focused on and really using as our part of our language and our vision as our department, and something that we're really dedicated to supporting our schools on, because the inputs that we are creating and coming to our community saying we believe these to be the best practices, we rely on our principals to come back and tell us, yes, those are the best practices and they're working, or do we need to come back and revisit? And those boots on the ground are an incredible part of the feedback loop that we need as a district. So I'm really excited to have them reporting out today. So I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, But in terms of what is working, these are some of the inputs that we have designed and said, these are the things that we believe to be working in pursuit of these goals. The designated intervention time, utilizing iReady and MyPath. But in that intervention time, we also recognize the need to train teachers, to train everyone of what do you do during that intervention time, and how do you then make it so it's not something that's totally separate, but is embedded within the actual 80% of the school day, as Dr. Lloyd pointed out. And so that's where you see the role of modeling and small group instruction. I see Ms. Brown back there, Mrs. Brown, who's been a phenomenal resource to our schools and going out and supporting on what small group instruction can look like and the use of manipulatives and really being able to do that, as well as the use of learning acceleration strategies, which are being done district-wide. What needs more attention? This is part of the course of any district, is really making sure we have a clear idea of what the adopted curriculum is and making sure that everyone is adhering to the curriculum. I think we've made real huge strides under the leadership of Dr. Galetti and our CNI team of having clarity around our curriculum. Using formative assessments, again, this is I'm talking the language of Dr. Lloyd here now, right? Of using formative assessments, but using them strategically. We oftentimes talk about the use of assessments as sort of dead data. When all is said and done, then we assess, and then we move on and not do anything with those assessments. We need to turn the page on that and really look at when we take assessments, what do we do in response to those assessments versus we're just moving on. Assessments don't do any good unless it's an influence in the instruction. And then again, with those data, it overlaps into those CTMs, which we know to be research-wise one of the most valuable. In fact, we were just reading an article today as part of cabinet in terms of the value, the research value of having teachers just collaboratively learn and work together, but really being structured in how we're embedding that in the time and in the school day for our teachers. And that's something that we're continually working on.
And so now we'll go ahead and look at goal 2.2. You can see a similar pattern here. And so all the things that Dr. Ailshire spoke to remain constant for this, which is good. That means that we don't have to defray our focus. We can really stay on target with this. And now we can go to President Bueno's question about this. President Bueno asked, how are principals taking the SOFG framework to their campuses to ensure that the adult behaviors are really being monitored? What are some specific examples we can point to help us understand how the instruction is changing as a result of the work that we're doing? And I'll invite Mr. Lodato to come up and talk about this from his perspective.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, cabinet, and community. Thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Emerson. I'll speak to a few and then I'll leave some space. So if you have questions, I can get into greater detail. But very intentionally, since last year, we started using the Teacher Clarity Playbook as our playbook and systematically ensuring that all teachers were trained in the process for what is essentially task analysis, but it's task analysis with intent to arrive at a point defined as success criteria, which requires of teachers to define what success looks like before you begin teaching, so that when you start teaching, you're teaching towards that and not defining what success looks like afterwards and then averaging or saying, oh, these kids did okay, so let's call that the best score, and these kids did a little bit less, so let's call it the middle score. It's not that at all. It's saying the standard says this, let's define what it looks like, sounds like, feels like on the front end, and then let's teach towards that to make sure that our actions as teachers are leading kids lockstep towards that. Second thing that we've done that I've started to do is collect lesson plans. It's actually, the setup was all during Q1 with the intent to start collecting on October 21st. So just a week ago, started collecting them, and I'm specifically collecting them in math. Our theory of action is to learn these skills very intentionally in mathematics, meaning the task analysis process, how we're questioning kids using learning acceleration strategies, and then later transferring those to other academic areas. But math is our focus, and so we're learning them in math. And that's what I'm collecting lesson plans in, giving feedback in. My teachers know that in the course of Q2, they can expect to get feedback every single week in Q2, intensively knowing that in Q3, I'm going to back off of that and push the gas in a different area. The third thing that we're doing is that I'm requiring of them is lesson comprehension checks, which is a part of the iReady suite. So teachers every week are assessing students using Form A. Sometimes they use Form B as a pretest, sometimes they use Form B as a second opportunity, but they're using Form A so that we can see on a regular basis, are we getting 80% of our students to the goal or not? And we're not consistently getting there yet. And for those that aren't getting there, we're supporting teachers in building the systems for small group instruction so that they have an answer to that. When you don't get to 80%, what do you do about that? And we want them to be able to answer the questions of, I know exactly what I'm going to do about that. It's going to happen on Monday and Wednesday for these group of students, Tuesday and Thursday for this group of students. I'm going to meet with certain students 3 days a week. Some are going to meet for only 2 days a week. And the highest performers, I might only see them once a week, but I have a plan for it. And we're helping them to build those in response to the lesson comprehension checks. In my weekly communication to all teachers and staff, I just call it the WAG, but it's a week at a glance. I'm reporting back to teachers so that all of them can see what I'm able to see because they're not privy to that in iReady. I'm reporting that back out to all of them so that we're holding up a mirror to ourselves with the goal of mutual accountability so that when somebody's not turning in lesson plans, if somebody is not using the lesson comprehension checks, there's actually very little I have to say because they're feeling that pressure from all their peers saying, why aren't you doing those? We're all doing them, and look at the results that we're getting. And when you're coming to our collaborative team meetings, why aren't you prepared? Now, thankfully, this isn't happening, that they're coming prepared, but the pressure is there and the pressure is coming from one another in a form of mutual accountability. So those are the 3 highlights. There are many other things that we're doing also in the vein of mathematics in particular, but those are 3 things that we have done to both support and train teachers, as well as monitor and give feedback to them and then adjust as we go.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Lodato?
President Bueno, Madam Chair, if I may comment, I'm really glad to have these examples and the perspective because I did not send my questions in early, but one of them was to ask what does focusing on these certain areas that we need to give more attention to, what does that look like? And so since we've started the progress monitoring, that's all I've been hearing about. So I'm really happy to hear about what's going on at Emerson. Do you have any student feedback maybe about, I guess, any changes that have gone on with teacher, these interactions that you're talking about?
So one of the things that we're doing to monitor is to go and ask students, what are you learning and why? And to try and ask 3 students that and then capture verbatim, how did they respond to that? And bring that back to teachers. You know, sometimes I'm speaking to an example of a kindergarten student the other day I think this was on Thursday of last week. And I leaned over to him quietly and I said, what are you learning? And he leaned back towards me and he said, I don't know. But he was doing everything the teacher was asking him to do. So he just didn't have the metacognitive awareness to be able to talk about it. In other cases, first graders will come up to me, specifically first graders. They're like really on it. Coming up to me in the lunchroom and they'll just start reciting to me. Like I didn't ask you to talk to me at the moment. They're coming up to me and saying, right now I am learning to add 2-digit numbers and regroup when the sum is greater than 10 and a given place value. And I'm like, that's great. Like I didn't even ask you to do that, and go sit down. And they're doing that regularly. Like they want to talk about it. They want to tell you why. One of the element in the Teacher Clarity Playbook, Module 6 is about relevance. So teachers have to intentionally think through, how am I going to make this relevant to a 6-year-old so that it matters to you, the 6-year-old, and present it in that context. So the early signs anecdotally are positive. I would say I didn't bring the numbers with me, but there absolutely are more students more of the time hitting the target of 30 to 50 minutes per week in MyPath, which is what we want them to be doing. And more teachers than at any time previously in the history at Emerson are assessing using the lesson comprehension check. So I'm a big believer that first you build the habits and then you fill it with content. So we've got the habits built. Now we're starting to change the content that they in those habits.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the progress monitoring of board interim goal number 2. I just also kind of wanted to maybe when you see the chart with all the data, that is expected, right, to be at 0 because we're testing our first graders on materials and curriculum that they don't know. So this is why it's the baseline. This is why they're starting at 0 because they don't know the content. And this is why the winter benchmark is the important one to be the clear indicator of how they're going to do in the spring.
Yes, that is exactly right. This is taken at the very beginning of the year. They don't yet know the content, but it's giving us the measure by which we're going to be able to see the progress that they're making.
Thank you. Yeah, because it was, when receiving our board packet, it was kind of shocking, be like, oh my God, we're at 0. But then it's like, no, we're like less than 90 days in. Of course, we're going to be at 0 when, they're 90 days in of being first time first graders. So I just wanted to clarify because, I know that putting all that data up on the screen and just sharing that data transparency can also be kind of weaponized. And I just wanted to clear the air of like, no, that is the expectation sort of. And with that, moving on to item 3, I motion the approval of the student outcome focused governance progress monitoring report of board interim goal number 2.
Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno.
We need a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Carmen Trujillo, I'll second.
Sorry about that. Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno.
Aye.
Ms. Erica de la Rosa
Aye.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye.
Thank you.
With that, we have adopted the progress monitoring report and we are moving on to discussion on board interim goal number 5.
Thank you, Madam President. So for goal number 5, this is our middle year's mathematics goal. The goal is that the percent of 8th grade students with a pass rate on mathematics as per the AASA will increase from 13% on August of 2023 to 38% by August of 2028. And so when we look at the next slide, you can see that we are making some steady progress in this area, but we do still have work to do. And just like in the lower grades, we have focus schools that we have identified through this. This is the same process that Dr. Lloyd described earlier, and you'll also notice similar areas to focus and similar plans to focus. When we look at the next page, again, and this is back to the point that you made earlier, President Bueno, you don't see as many red in the fall assessments, and largely because these are, even though these are the first time the students are taking these tests on 5th grade concepts, they have some knowledge and skills already that they can apply and extrapolate to be able to respond to the questions, but you also see the responses are not as high as we would hope that they would be. So in the far right column, winter target for 24-25, you can see the goals that have been set for each of the schools based on where their students are performing currently. This represents 5.1, the 5th grade cohort moving from 17% to 26% by 2026. And if we look at the next slide, you can see that for goal 5.2, this is for our 6th grade students moving from 15% to 24%. And again, a similar pattern, although we have talked about this before, but there is a shift in 5th grade mathematics to 6th grade mathematics, 7th grade and 8th grade. It does become more difficult. And if you'll recall, last spring, we actually took some time to break apart what are the types of questions that students are responding to as they progress in the mathematics. That said, these are the same sorts of focus areas that we have. And as we look at President Bueno's question again, it's the same question that we had for the primary grades. What are we doing at the middle school? And we have 2 principals who are going to talk with us about the things that they're doing in their schools. And these are 2 focus schools, both Herrera and Capital School. What are the specific examples we can point to, and how are the principals holding the adults in the system accountable to ensure that we really are helping to change student outcomes? So welcome, Dr. Klinick and Mrs. Botts.
President Bueno, members of the governing board, cabinet, and our Phoenix Elementary community. I believe everything we are doing at Herrera really falls under two categories. So the first would be collaboration. Our staff members and all of our teachers participate in collaborative team meetings. And this is with a data-driven approach. So we've been looking at data and goal setting within those grade level teams. We also have leadership team members present at those team meetings, so we're able to understand exactly what's going on across the school. We have a lot of collaboration as well with our master teacher who's been working on co-planning, co-teaching, modeling, and working a lot with our 5th through 8th grade classrooms. We also have our learning acceleration specialist who's been a huge support for our campus. So we've been focusing on teacher clarity this year and clarity within that instruction. So when it comes to teacher clarity, we have our success criteria that we're looking for with our learning acceleration specialist, as well as any sort of instructional leader or a leadership team member that goes into the classroom. So similar to our early childhood conversation that we had earlier, one thing we're looking for when we go into every classroom is that teacher clarity, what is happening in the classroom, being able to understand exactly what the student learning is. So checking in with the students as well as the staff members to make sure everyone knows exactly what's supposed to be learned. And our second large group would be interventions in general. So our middle school 5th through 8th grade classes have an intervention block built into their school day. And during that time, we're looking at our benchmark data and benchmark assessments to be able to identify ELA groups and math groups specifically. And our teachers have divided up the students separately, specifically for their intervention time block. And during that time, they're working with small groups, they're working on individualized support for students and making sure those students are tracking their progress along the way. And with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague.
Good evening, President Bueno, Vice President Trujillo, members of cabinet and community. Thank you for allowing me to come and speak a little bit about the things that we're doing at Capitol. So first off, I want to also thank the leadership for bringing the SOFG to us, because I think that it has helped us shape our work and be able to be more specific. So bringing the goals of mathematics to our campus, we've been able to align and create more coherent systems. So this year I created a few different school goals and really tried to focus on ownership, because we saw we were doing learning acceleration strategies and people were engaging in those. But once our learning acceleration specialist was out of the room, we weren't seeing the ownership. So we have tried to we sent a whole group of about 5 teachers, as well as my IAS, to the county this summer to have extra support and training on the background and information about why we're doing learning acceleration. And so I've been able to see a huge gain in the ownership. And some of my teachers are leading my professional development because they strongly believe in learning acceleration and have been able to honestly change the culture and climate around learning acceleration. So it's not just a coach comes in, it's truly changing and supporting habits and the way that we do things. Today, for example, we had the new teacher project come and take pictures on our campus, and they were working on a math lesson, and the teacher said to me afterwards in the CTM, she said, "This year has been the best year that I've ever had." And she said, "It's because of you, Ms. Wells." And I said, "No, I want to reframe that. It's because you took the ownership and you're changing the things that you're doing on a daily basis to make sure that you're making those changes and gains." And it doesn't come overnight, it takes time. So our school goals were building a culture of coaching. And so being able to utilize like our teacher action plans. So Mr. Lodato and we presented to the other principals, and we changed some of the teacher action plans in the way that we set goals. So we are now setting goals that are aligned to SOFG. So if our overall school goal is middle grades math, and these are our numbers, right? Based on where we're at, then we broke them down into quarterly goals and put those into their teacher action plans. So they're actually tracking those based on work with Dr. Lloyd and looking at those assessment dashboards so that the teachers can track how they're doing over time. so that there's a little bit more cohesiveness. And then in addition to that, we changed our collaborative team meeting structure to support aligning it to learning acceleration. So we were already doing things in our coaching cycles, such as looking at student by student data and sorting who's learning, who's struggling, what are we doing about it? And we just better align the way that we structured them so that it's more of the same language, and it's just created more ownership and ability because they're already doing them in the learning cycles. So they're more successful in speaking about those things. The second goal that we have as a school was to be able to use and support SOFG and school goals of, we did both increasing middle grades math and EL student growth. And we are doing that by aligning instruction to the learning acceleration strategy. So in some of our classrooms, you'll see the concept map with the ideas in the middle, and then you'll see the different learning targets that the teachers are working on. For students, you sometimes will see the teachers be able to have like a model of a student sharing their work. And so that model, like for example, in first grade, they were previously working on an opinion piece. And so the kids actually shared the part of the target that they were working on, they read it aloud, and then they posted it up on the board. And that is evidence that they're showing that they're tracking through those targets. So the other thing that we're doing is our weekly updates. I'm tracking the learning acceleration strategies. So from last year and this year, the three big ones that we were working on were the tip chart, which is a vocabulary structure or concept map, and then the concept map and the data trackers. So we expected that when they come to the collaborative team meetings that they're bringing the data trackers and actually showing evidence that they're checking student work in the classrooms. But then too, like I said, we weren't seeing as much ownership, so we wanted to continue to build on that. So this year we've done some professional development around scaffolds, which aligns to the EL goal. And so with the help of Mary Lou and Eden, we did like a lesson a PD all in Spanish. And then we had the teachers kind of reflect on what scaffolds would have supported them. And then I actually had two of my first grade teachers lead another example of that. And they had little envelopes where they passed out scaffolds that would have supported us. We were building a sentence in Portuguese, and they created the sentences that had a capital letter and a period at the end, and then that simple scaffold, how it supported us as adults so that we could kind of feel what some of our students are feeling. Then we just had our professional development on Jumpstart lessons. And so we've been creating, like after we do our professional development, we then ask for examples of how they're doing what we ask them to do in professional development. We share examples in our weekly updates. So going forward, we're also, going back to the teacher action plan. So within the teacher action plans, each person created their goals aligned to their LOI as well as the data. I then created like specific goal groups where I'm calling them collegial walkthrough groups, where the teachers are going into one another's classrooms and giving each other feedback. So they set those goals and they're giving each other feedback on them. And every single educator said, I've never been able to go into another teacher's classroom. And it's amazing to see just those little things that we don't think about that we do every day that impact me. And they actually asked like, hey, can I see a specific thing? So our next step for our next collegial walkthroughs are that we will organize to where they can see that specific request that they're asking for. So those are the things that I have been working on and we will continue to implement at Capitol.
And just for clarity, really quickly, the teacher action plan and the LOI are the teacher evaluation systems. So we're using the teacher evaluation system, easy for me to say, and bringing it back to concrete goals that are about our student outcomes.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Clinic and Ms. Botts. I'm speechless, so I'll ask if my colleagues have any questions.
The feeling's mutual, President Bueno. I am just overwhelmed with all the great work that you're doing, and it's This is just such a rewarding feeling. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. I really appreciate you guys so much and the information that you're giving us.
Thank you. With that, I motion the approval of student outcome focused governance progress monitoring report of board interim goal number 5.
This is Carmen Trujillo. I'll second.
Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Ms. Erica De La Rosa,
Aye.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye. Thank you.
With that, our motion passes and we're moving on to superintendent guardrail number 2.
Thank you, Madam President. So Superintendent Guardrail 2 and the interim goals monitoring for this, our guardrail number 2 is that the superintendent shall not allow the district to operate without a human organizational customer service plan to foster trust and collaboration. And to that end, we have developed some different monitoring pieces. I'm going to take us back to our theory of action. When we think about an organizational structure, our front office customer service training has been a huge input because our customer service starts at our front offices. And then the other is with our family and community engagement staff, working with them to develop family advocacy training. And what we initially imagined has actually morphed into many different opportunities that we're excited about. But our outputs are that we want to see better role clarity for the people in the front office and agency to be able to serve families and complete tasks that are required of them efficiently so that they can be responsive to the needs that we have as a state entity, but also that they are feeling less stressed when they are having to respond to family needs. Our parent and FACE participation, we're working currently on getting All in Ed Parent Academy participants started, but as you see in our next set of metrics that we're going to be using, we are building that out even more. The outcomes of all of this is that we have high rates of family and community satisfaction with the district and with our schools. So as you look at guardrail number 2.1, by May 2026, the district will continue the training and support of front office staff to enhance a culture of customer care and systems efficiency, expanding to improve all district offices. This includes the central office as well as the site offices. Culture of customer care, ensuring a satisfaction rate with all district staff interactions of 85% or higher, as measured by quarterly surveys of families, staff, community partners, and instant feedback checks in offices. So in our first year, one of the things that you're going to see is that we're really going to focus on reducing the rate of errors that we have in audit work that we do. And so we've provided trainings already in Q1 with front office. We will continue to provide more trainings, but you can see through these the metrics that we're going to be using. Over the course of the 2 years, we anticipate being able to provide a minimum of 20 trainings to the different groups and reducing our audit rate from less than 25% to less than 5% and increasing our satisfaction to greater than 85%. This is broken down so that you have a concrete metric that we can look at in year 1 and then again in year 2. Interim Guardrail 2.2 is that by May of 2026, the district will provide training for family and community engagement specialists in communication and support strategies to increase parents' academic engagement in supporting their child's education, as measured by an increase in parent support courses from 0 courses in 2023 to 12 courses completed by 2026. And so again, when we look at the metrics here, you can see we are beginning with training for our families in our FACE specialists, our family and community engagement specialists, in holding literacy events at the focus schools that are literacy focused and holding math events for the math focused schools. We're also working with a group of FACEs on Southwest behavioral training to provide support for parents in a variety of different areas. And as I mentioned earlier, the All in Ed Parent Academy. In addition to these that are here, we're also reaching out to a couple other opportunities, including working with a fellow board member in the Creighton School District to look at how we support families who are facing housing insecurity. So working with Fair Housing Acts and helping educate our FACES and front office staff as well as social workers so that they understand how to correctly direct families to the resources that they need when they're facing housing insecurities. In year 2, we move into more showcases of literacy and math events, increasing the numbers that we're holding and increasing the numbers of opportunities that we have for our FACES to provide supports not only at the family and community engagement centers, but across the district on an on-demand basis. And that is the wrap up of where we are currently with the monitoring of the superintendent guardrail number 2.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I do have maybe 1 or 2 questions. So just to clarify, these are new. We just approved these, so that's why we don't have any data, I guess, going forward. I mean, sorry, from here right now. So my question would be that when we have this breakdown, will we be able to kind of know how many participants we have, how many responses, get that kind of data included, or I'm not too sure. Does that align with what you guys are going to be looking at, or is it more like, I guess, what does that look like with as far as what will the data look like that those targets are based on?
So if the target is based on trainings, it would be the number of trainings and the number of participants. If the target is based on a reduction of audit findings and a reduction or audit errors, we'll be doing checks through our own systems to test those. It would be the reduction of audit errors as well as the customer satisfaction. So since these were just adopted earlier this month, we are going to develop the surveys and the customer service surveys that we'll be able to use just in time at front offices and a district office to make sure that we're being responsive. So those responses will also be part of what are reflected as we continue to go through the monitoring process.
Thank you. Thank you. May I ask what those will look like? Is that something front office staff will ask of parents, or is it more of the FACE specialists?
It would be both. The idea is that there's a QR code that says, how are we doing or how did we do? You snap the QR code and you tell us we satisfied your question. We responded positively to your request. What feedback do you have for us? Just 3 simple, quick that they can do on their phone in English and in Spanish so that they can give us instant feedback. And that helps us then change our practices immediately rather than just like we're doing with our school settings, rather than waiting until the end of the year for the end of the year survey. Let's get immediate feedback.
Great. What would that look like for somebody who doesn't have a smartphone?
All of our classroom, our front offices and district office, we have Google Chromebooks available. And so they would also be able to do that on a Chromebook.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Last question. Is that the only place that these customer satisfaction surveys will be given out?
That would be where the just-in-time customer service satisfactions would be given out, but we do want to do quarterly following each of the parent conferences, being able to come back to families to say, you have just met with your teachers and seen the progress that your students are making and looked at our goals. How are we doing? What questions do you have? What needs do you have? Again, so that we can respond more specifically to those kinds of targeted questions rather than just asking a vague question. Are you satisfied with how your child is doing? Would you like more support to help your child? Do you know about the FACE who can help you with these aspects?
Sorry, one more question. So that covers parent-teacher conferences in the office kind of interactions. Is there any other interactions that you're looking for feedback from?
We have to be careful about survey fatigue because we are also surveying everyone through our reimagining process. So we have a variety of different ways that we're doing it. However, we want to make sure that the data that we're gathering for this particular aspect of building customer satisfaction of the questions we're asking are specific to that in the areas that we've had pain points in the past. So what we're doing right now will focus on those areas and it will help us identify where we need to go next.
Sweet. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those questions, Vice President Trujillo. With that, I motion the approval of the student outcome focused governance progress monitoring superintendent guardrail number 2.
This is Carmen Trujillo. I'll second.
Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Ms. Erica De La Rosa.
Aye.
And Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving on to our board self guardrail number 2. Our board guardrail number 2 is in attaining the board's super student outcome goals, the board shall not, during regularly scheduled board meetings, spend less than 50% of its time progress monitoring the board's student outcome goals and or superintendent guardrails. So on tonight's agenda, we had 2 examples of what it looked like to progress monitor our board interim goal number 2, number 5, and the superintendent guardrail number 2. So I have our data from this past quarter 3, that includes July, August, September. In July, we spent 66% of our time focused on student outcomes. August, we spent 63% of our time, and in September, we spent 41% of our time, totaling to 56%. So we did hit our guardrail.
Can I make a comment?
Mhm.
And I feel strongly about hitting this 41%, which is a little under the 50, but we did have a study session and though it was closed, so those minutes don't count towards our SOFG minutes, but that is what we were covering was SOFG items. So I am bummed we didn't hit our target, but that's the reason why we didn't hit it. So I just wanted to have that in there.
On the record, we would have hit it if our study session would have been allowed, which we'll have some words with our coach, but that's another thing. But anyways,
But may I make a comment? I do think it's important for our public to understand that the reason that we closed the study session is because we were doing mindset work, which is where you have to be able to be vulnerable and talk about some of the adult actions that have occurred. And in order to be vulnerable and for people to be open and honest in that process, there was a decision to not have the broadcast because that might inhibit some people from feeling that they could be completely honest and vulnerable. So while it did take away from our minutes, I do applaud the governing board for taking on the work and being open to that.
Likewise, Dr. G, thank you for the extra info. That makes perfect sense.
okay, so thank you for vouching for us. But yes, we hit 56%. So moving on to community communications. This is the time for the public to comment. Members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01G, actions taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to criticism, or rescheduling the matter for further consideration and discussion at a later time. Do we have any public comment?
We do. We have one.
One in person or online?
One in person, no electronic comment.
Okay, so we have one in person and thank you. Mr. David, if you would like to come up and have your public comment heard, you will have 2 minutes. 3 minutes. 3.
Yeah, without chopping into that 3 minutes, can I give everybody a copy of what I tried to type up? I think there's one for everybody there. Okay, I met Superintendent Gonzalez a few days ago at a meeting and she mentioned this meeting here and I think she's a pretty civil person. These are not really sentences, but they're thoughts. I just have some thoughts. I don't get involved in public education or anything like that.
Are you starting?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And then I'm 80 years old by God's grace right now. And was raised in the neighborhood at 13th Street, South McDowell, graduated from Whittier in 1958, 66 years ago, before any of you were apparently born. And Phoenix Union in 62, which is 62 years ago, ASU in 1970, 54 years ago. I was raised in a single parent mother's environment, had a paper out 11th Street to 13th Street, McDowell, Palm Lane, whatever. And then I was a previous IRS auditor, a City of Phoenix Operations Analyst Department for the Management and Budget. I'm currently self-employed over there at 1400 East Roosevelt and income tax returns. And I just have some thoughts here, my attitude, because I thought I talked fast, but you got some people in here talk pretty rapid too.
They talk
So I
all
didn't
day.
expect that. So hear me now and believe me later is my attitude normally. And it's my understanding there's 5 institutions in every culture: education, economic, religious, and political, social, whatever. I don't know what the 5th one, I forgot. That was 50 years ago. I graduated from Whittier. Yay, 1958. Yeah. Whittier grade school, and the teacher back then said, and it stuck with me, how to discern good from evil is if everyone in society does it, will society grow, be enhanced, thrive, or will it die off? So that's kind of stayed with me, because upon that thought, I kind of check out what the Bible says too. And then just to put a framework on where I'm coming from, I figure there's 2 foundational facts of human enlightenment. Number 1, there is a God and you aren't him. So forgive me if I offend anybody, or don't forgive me, I don't care. And the Pledge of Allegiance, apparently you still do that here. It says under God, not instead of. That's my understanding. One of the first congressional acts in financing this country was to print Bibles for school children. And then I've noticed during the last 25-ish type years, the schools look like prisons. They really do. And it's my understanding that the mass shootings and stuff originally started off with a certain religion, Muslim, if you will. And then it went, my outside of observations, that then it went into people withdrawing from psychiatric medicines. So I think they ought to make psychiatrists, put them on the back burner. And then the scriptures say, casting down imaginations, exalt itself against the knowledge of God. Imagination, I'm told in Hebrew, is the word for human reasoning. Oh, and then I looked through your literature on the internet there, and it says empowering future minds, which to me indicates they don't have a mind right now, but you're going to empower them. Oh, geez, thanks a lot. And then that their minds are empty right now. And I'm thinking it should be growing minds or maturing minds. And then to me, the formula for success, because God has blessed me, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all these things shall be added unto you. That's the religious side of it. As a Christian, I try to be a Christian. And then the fear of the Lord is, am I close to running out of time?
Yeah, it was
Oh,
3
God.
minutes.
Yeah, no, the fear of the Lord is beginning of knowledge. So a lot of people in today's world, who needs God? Because they got $10 in the bank and 3 friends, but I don't come from that point. And God said he made male and female, and what God has joined together, let no man put asunder, even if they're on the school board. And now I noticed in here, gender expression, I'm not sure what that really means. Because I look down here and I think I'm a guy, and you ladies are X chromosomes, I'm the XY chromosomes. Don't scramble my brain. Okay, so I don't know how that fits in with what you're teaching kids, but then Psalms 1:1, blessed man, whatever. In the backside there. And God's no respecter of persons. He don't care if you're rich, poor, Jew, Gentile, Mexican, whatever, blah, 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 which reminds me, Phoenix Union High School 62, if I remember right, it was 1/3 black, 1/3 brown, 1/3 white, 10% Asians. And so the way I figured, if God doesn't care if you're got assets or not, I don't think we should. And then equity. I got a real serious problem with this new word coming out 15 years ago or something. Equity. Equity is not equality. And equity is communism, when everybody shares in the sufferings of equal sufferings and no one excels except maybe the 2% leaders. And there's no initiative or reason to excel. And there's no private property ownership or property. And then June 29th to 23, the United States Supreme Court, whoever their opinion means, which apparently doesn't mean much in today's governments, the Constitutional Equal Protection Clause in the 1964 Civil Rights Act guarantee equality, not equity. And then it was a decision of Harvard University and also a decision the same day for University of North Carolina where the court struck down diversity, equity, inclusion. I don't know how that fits in here, but it's my understanding ASU is real big on that. And the reason it hits me the wrong way is because I scored it in 1970. I scored 100 on the air traffic control test coming out of ASU. I never even had a job interview. So my feelings have been hurt for 60 years now, whatever it is, 52 years, I don't know. And then they also struck down affirmative actions, and I haven't heard that buzzword in here tonight, but and obviously the men competing in women's sports, despite what Washington DC says, that violates Title IX of the code. And Darwin on his deathbed, he didn't believe in the evolution concept. The second law of thermodynamics science, over time, things go from the complex to the simple. They don't go from the simple to the complex. This ain't going to become a book. You can sit there and watch it for 2 billion years. It's going to be a piece of paper with some print, period. And so, thanks for listening to me. And then my neighbors, I got sick. Oh, this is I love her. My 6 neighbor kids, their parents are illegally from Guatemala. They're not there right now. They moved out 2 years ago. 6 neighbor kids. We're 4 houses from Emerson. I said it wrong. We're 4 houses from Garfield. Why is the yahoos in the bus thing here, or whoever signs them up, why do they send them across 16th Street on a bus to Edison?
Because we have special programs that are at Edison that are not offered at Garfield, and we have a busy street on 16th Street. So I understand your observations.
That's a big expense because it's my understanding 4 million of the last, thank you for letting me talk, 4 million
You got
of
your
the
5
last,
minutes. Thank you.
4 million of the last $20 million budget is going into
The transportation.
transportation, yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I'm paying 67% of my.
We're really
real estate
glad you were
taxes
here
going for
tonight.
education.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
listening. Hear me now and believe me later. So I'm not a public speaker, as you can tell.
You did wonderful. Moving on to our consent agenda. I motion that we approved our consent agenda.
This is Carmen Trujillo. I'll second.
Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Ms. Erica De La Rosa,
Aye.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to information and discussion, where we will receive and discuss our district energy efficiency audit.
Madam President, members of the board and our community, we're pleased to have our partners from Verigy here this evening who have conducted an energy audit for us, and they're going to share the findings of their audit. So I'm going to have Ms. Repke and Randy come on up. And we also have, I believe Jim Gale is available from GUST if we have questions about any of the opportunities that might be in front of us.
Hi, good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Gonzalez, Cabinet, and community. I'm here with my partner, Randy Falconer, as well. My name is Shannon Repke. Pleased to be here tonight. Thank you for the invite to go over the energy audit results. We've been hard at work for the last, I don't know, I'd say 6 months or so, touching every light bulb, looking at all of facets of your school district to see what we can do to improve, not just comfort, learning, curriculum as in STEM around energy, but also improving the economics of your school district as well. I have this clicker here. So I'll go through an introduction of who we are, the road that we've traveled to get here so far, and then the results of your assessment as well, and just general path forward for how these projects come to fruition. A little bit of history on Verigy. I'm very proud of our history. I've been with the company for just under 10 years and seen a lot of growth within our company when it comes to modernization and technology. We started here in Arizona. Been a company for a little over 30 years. We were the #1 energy services company in Arizona, and in fact, the only one that self-performs the work. Our headquarters for our company are right off of Broadway and 34th Street. Come on down, pretty close. We have a couple other offices in Tucson too, in North Phoenix to help support the rest of the state, but we really hit all four corners, or five if you count the state boundaries there. But we're proud to be K-12. We're proud to self-perform. When I mean self-perform, we have technicians that are our mechanical HVAC, we have electricians, our solar technicians, we have our controls technicians, engineers, project management staff, superintendent staff, plumbers, and all of the above that are here local and actually in the trucks. So if you're around town and in Phoenix or anywhere, you've probably seen very G trucks rolling around too. So 95% of the work that we do is in-house. Coming into our long history with Arizona K-12 specifically, I've included just a quick rundown of our partnerships and our clients over the years. We've made, I think we're up and above 80 school districts around Arizona that we've done work with. Some examples on the right for different project sizes. The green, I think that is a multi-phase. The blue is single phase. So there's options, right? And usually these projects are planned out for short and long-term solutions for school districts. So you don't want to replace a piece of equipment that was just replaced 2 years ago. You still have value there. So you're looking at what could you do in 10 years? What could you do now? What could you do in 15? That's why some of these are phased out. But we do a lot of the performance contracts in the state of Arizona. So where we are today, kind of how we got here, we met with your cabinet, your superintendent, to identify the district goals and needs for facilities, operations, and financials, right? And then from there, we took all that feedback from operations, facilities, and your business management team, and we did our audits. And that's what I meant by touching all the light bulbs. We had all of our audit team and project developers come on site and coordinate. We checked out keys. We did all of this without impacting the student learning environment. A lot of it was done at night, early mornings, so that we could adhere to that. And then we met up with your cabinet as well to present on what the PEA is as a preliminary energy assessment. So what are those results? We'd look at your utility budget and the escalators that the utility companies are putting on everybody, commercial, residential, what have you, and seeing what that looks like and what that opportunity looks like. And that's what I'll present here today is the audit findings and what that preliminary assessment looks like on the economics. So that's where we are, the governing board update and presentation. Following that would be a scope selection and so on. But I'll use that at the path forward in the last slide. So some of the focus points identified by your cabinet, always student success and student first, safe and healthy buildings and environments for your students and staff. What are your building needs? What are your budget constraints, your long-term partnerships? Who do you like to work with? What are your products that you prefer? How do we make your operations and systems more effective while also adhering to the Arizona statute that we have to abide by, which is ARS 15-21301? And how do we get you as much of the federal and utility rebate incentives that are on the table today? These are ever changing. They might have been different 2 years ago. The utility rebates tend to change them every year. We keep a pulse on that. We do know that the federal incentives are on the table today, and they should be there for at least another year or so that we can see. What we surveyed would be LED lighting, HVAC, your control system, building envelope. How do you integrate and modernize your facilities, conserve water, and also solar shade. So the kind of the high level district assessment, and I'll also take questions, when you have them, but what we wanted to do is compress what the audit results are. And usually the audit and the investment grade audit specifically is like 800 pages. And so we're trying to give you guys not an 800-page presentation. For the LED lighting, we do have some LED, and usually that comes when there's failures. And so your operations team will typically replace your lighting, your fluorescent bulbs with LED bulbs to be good stewards of the environment and to be more efficient. But to do that across the district would take years and years. Also, HVAC still doing an incredible job utilizing SFB funding on a lot of your larger equipment and your package units and split units, but you have roughly 110 units across the district that are past its useful life. So we would recommend replacement on those. Again, those are aged and old, and they're likely using R22 refrigerant, which is very expensive to charge in your old equipment. On your control system, there's a little bit of lack of modernization for today's day and age. And what your district is hoping to do is have what's called an open protocol system where anybody can work on it. You're not tied to any specific vendor. If there's a vendor that you're working with and they're underperforming, you can switch to another one. You're not hamstrung by that. So updating to a more modern system. Building envelope, this is simple, right? This isn't full weatherization projects. The SFB typically takes care of that, or hopefully do. This is your weather stripping. This is where you're sealing cracks in the buildings. Something really easy. It's called a low-hanging fruit, if you will, because you can get in and get out really quickly and it has a really fast payback. What you're trying to avoid here is having your very expensive cool air escape the building, or having the very hot air get into the building, and then therefore it stresses your HVAC unit a little bit more too. So avoid that. That's kind of a little picture on the right-hand side there of where we do infrared, and you can see leaking, where the air might be leaking. And so we scan in those areas. Water usage, this is another pretty easy one. Most utilities, as they grow or have more needs, tend to reflect those infrastructure costs on you. Also, water is scarce in Arizona, as we know. And so what we do here is we take out not just the flush valves, but also the china associated with urinals and toilets, and because they need to match in order to actually work properly. And most of which we find, this is a high number, but it's not abnormal for school districts. Highest flush measured was 9 gallons. So what does that mean? It's not across every toilet in your district. That was just the highest one. And usually when they get aged, you're thinking 3 to 5 maybe per gallon per flush. And that's like a whole water cooler in your office, right? And it's not all in one, it's because it's running, and it's just kind of failed, that mechanism's failed. And so we go in, we put in a mechanism that doesn't actually stretch over time, doesn't allow you to get back to where you are today. And then solar, of course, that's where a lot of the federal incentives all go over, are actually really impactful to the budget right now. So you do have solar present at 7 sites. You have 12 sites left to install on the major meters where there's actual real value. You don't really want to put them on the small meters. So where you have your best payback sites is what we focus on. APS has increased their rates in 22, 23. They announced another rate increase here in 24 for, I think, 25. It's not really slowing down. A lot of what they're doing is dependent on which kind of fees. Is it energy, which is KWH? Is it demand, which is KW? It's all the same when it comes to how they manage their bills. It is passed on to school districts. So what we're trying to do is reduce both. So solar reduces majority KWH, whereas your building envelope and your control system and your HVAC is the demand charges. And so we do in a cohesive, holistic project, so you can actually bring down both. So the Inflation Reduction Act is on the table today. We don't know what the future holds. It could be, it's a big election year. We don't know where it's going to go. The fact of the matter is 25 and likely 26, this is going to be on the table. This is not new in relation to the investment tax credit. That has been around for a long time. It was just only available to private investors with that large tax appetite. And so therefore public schools or nonprofits didn't really, absorb those. And so what this does is it opens up to public school districts, to higher ed, and to nonprofits. So you actually do have a potential for a 40%, and that's the holistic cost of the project for solar to come back to the district. But more closely, it'll be about 30%. That's the base for the investment tax credit for public schools. The extra 10 is for low income communities. And that is something that you need to apply for. So we've actually done that with a couple school districts, and Creighton's one of them. They just got awarded on the bonus, which is awesome. We can help you guys out with that as well, but that's a huge amount, 40%. That's a lot coming back, about 2.2 million. What a lot of school districts really like too is transparency. You guys talked a lot in your board presentations about charts and metrics and holding that accountability and being able to see where you guys are at and how the performance is going. And that's the same thing here. So this project, we have to provide an annual reconciliation report, which is called M&V, stands for measurement and verification. Every energy savings company has to do that if they do a performance project. And it's different in statute for every state, but especially here in Arizona, we know how to adhere to that. This allows you to have a 24/7 pulse on what that measurement and verification might look like. It's not going to be perfect, but what it does, it allows you to see if you have any spikes. and any issues in your utility bills today and not have to wait until an annual reconciliation report. It holds that accountability on a more regular basis, monthly basis when your utility bills come in. So that's what the chart on the left hand looks like here. That's an example for Cartwright School District. Their average cost as it's circled is 70 cents per square foot. That's really good for an elementary school district. Typical elementary school districts should be under $1 per square foot. High school districts are a little bit bigger. They have large athletics and all of those. And so they're usually a little bit over $1. You guys are some under $2 a square foot. So there's a lot of room and opportunity for you guys to achieve some energy savings here. On the right-hand side, those are just load profiles for your demand up top and how your buildings would be operating, or at least Cartwright's in this example. And on the bottom side, that's your solar. So those dashboards are available, and that's part of modernizing your buildings and adding analytics so that people can have the information and not be reading, yesterday's newspaper. You can actually see what is going on today. So the model here on performance contracts, and I'll stick to Arizona statute, is an example here on the left-hand side, the before, which is really your current. So you're looking at, you have a utility budget that Ms. Mena keeps track of annually, right? And that utility spend is made to keep the lights on and keep the buildings comfortable and cool. That it has to happen. It's in your existing budget currently, and you're budgeting for those maybe inflation or escalators year over year as you do. Right now, they're going to SRP, Southwest Gas, and City of Phoenix. If you do the energy performance and energy savings contract, what you're doing is you're lowering that utility spend to electric, water, and gas in order to use that same budget for capital improvements. So if you can lower, let's say for your example, $775,000 to $1 million a year for your reduction, that $1 million for that first year is going into improving your classrooms and your buildings. That has to adhere to statute, and it has to be guaranteed by the energy services company. And it works in the favor of the school district, as it should, as a checks and balance to reduce risk of the school district, so that if an energy service company misses on that amount, if you miss by $100,000, that check has to come back to the school district in order to fulfill that payment to the financing. So it behooves your energy company to be a little bit conservative on that so that they can give you good news at the end of the year and overperform. But you don't want to overperform too much, because that means you left a lot of scope on the table. So that's where you see on the after there, that additional savings up top. Right now, the district is technically currently paying for this project right now. So how do you reduce your utility spend and put it back into the classroom? So this is one funding mechanism. So what we know today, so this is in what we call an ECM matrix, your energy conservation measures. Each one of the columns highlights the energy conservation measure that I outlined before. Along the columns on the left are your school names, of course. And so what we looked at is doing LED lighting. This is where we would install LED lighting anywhere that you don't already have it. So you don't fix what's not broken. So, but all of your schools need LED lighting. It's just that there might be kind of onesie-twosies across. What this does here too is it modernizes or standardizes rather on your classrooms. And it also includes dynamic lighting within the classroom spaces and learning environments where you can actually have control, that the instructor or teacher can have control over the lighting and be able to dim in certain areas. If the students are all wound up after lunch and recess, you bring the lights down. If you need to be more energetic, you bring the lights up. There's more creativity there and programming on the lighting. And then on the HVAC upgrades, as I mentioned, you guys are doing a good job at keeping them up. We do have a few campuses where it wouldn't be in the scope or not needed, and therefore they're not X'd out in that chart. Orchestrate is the modernization platform I was speaking to. That's the EMS upgrades, along with water efficiency, building envelope at all sites, and then the 12 for the solar. So here's a sample project based on that matrix from before. What this looks at is the all-in, if you were to do every building improvement that you possibly could today. And of course, you can phase that out. You can take the whole apple, if you will, achieve those energy savings right off the bat, however you see fit, right? So this is the sample project, and it's really a rough order of magnitude. So what you're looking at is typically a 20-year Banks are giving the 20-year dollars, and I'll let Jim Giel speak to the financing and the legal counsel aspect of that. This one would require bond contribution as well. So paying in about 5.5 would get you that additional up to 28 million project. And then you're looking at a lifetime savings of about 54 million. So the statute states that the savings over the term has to match all of your payments. So savings over term for the 20-year would be 36, but we also like to look at and give an overview of your lifetime savings, which is the lifetime of the equipment. So the solar panels are warranted for 30, they last for 40-year lifespan of the solar, but we don't include that for the term, if you will. So additional benefits and impact, kind of a re-review, but good to highlight. What we like to do is have really the enhanced learning environment for student success, but also access to hands-on STEM learning. So we've done some really fun stuff before, the solar car races, or can you convert with your building system this kWh usage into how many trees were saved in the environment or what have you. There's a lot of really fun formulas that you can do, and it's offered on the EPA website. We actually made a custom dashboard for J.O. Combs too back in the day for them. So students like to have fun with it, keeps things interesting. And then there's also a more high-level dashboarding that you can do in offices or, for the community to show what you guys are saving in utility bills. We do have to adhere to state statute, as I mentioned. This is a long-term partnership. So it's a 20-year, deal. Who's going to be around for 20 years? Most people, right? Most companies that are back that have been here for 30 years. Our idea is to be here for the school district for the entire term and on and forward. And, I'd really lean on you guys to speak to your neighbors, on who's used Verigy before, but this is really the long-term partnership that we take great pride in. Reducing your energy expenses while utilizing your existing budget, utilizing those federal dollars that are currently here, and just overall being a good environmental steward in the community. Those are things that we value as well. So possible next steps, and really this is just kind of the typical 4, is really finalizing the project. How does a district see the best value to the project? How do they want to go about it? Do they want to phase it out? Do you want to do the full project in one area in one time? Also, governing board approval would be required, of course. Executing that guaranteed savings agreement, starting the project, and then getting those federal dollars. And I think that's it. So I welcome any questions.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions other than I'm really thankful for your presentation and the work that you do to help with our efficient energy, using efficient energy. And I learned that our HVAC was well deserving of the raise that they received last school year. So I'm really glad to see that we take care of our HVAC system. Do we have any questions?
This is Carmen Trujillo. I do have just a quick question. I know you said next steps would be, well, whatever you said in the project there, but I guess is there like, what does that look like? Is it more you sharing like a triage list of what's most important right now or what's cheapest? Like, what does that look like when we start to have those conversations about what the district will move forward on or won't? Like, do you have any insight on that for us?
Yeah, yes. Great question, governing board member. I would say that the finalizing the project within that next steps, what does that mean? It means that we sit down with cabinet again. We go through what's most important. We do need to finalize all aspects of the budget for this project as well to make sure that it fits within the guaranteed savings project. But when we speak to cabinet, what we'll talk to is that this is a holistic approach, right? So if you have your HVAC units, those ones have a longer payback. When you blend those with your water efficiency and with your solar, and especially your lighting, that's where the holistic project comes into fruition. And so a lot of those ECMs lean on each other for energy and operational savings. And so it's a little bit more difficult if you want to capture every ECM in one, if you end up parceling them out. So really, that's the conversation. I think when it comes to finalizing project, it's scope and how would you want to accomplish that?
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you very, very much.
Sure.
Any further questions?
My question, Madam Chair, my next question would be, are we going to hear about finance next, or is this kind of the end of the presentation?
So we can certainly speak to finance, at least how that works. I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not licensed to do any of the advising on it. But however, I do know that Mr. Giel with Gus Rosenfeld has been working with your executive director of business services on those, collecting maybe the beginning steps of what that looks like in order to accomplish that, maybe talking to various financial institutions. And then at that point, they would come to an agreement with all of you on maybe what the best rate is and what does that look like for you guys. And we do have to guarantee the interest on any of the financing. And so, the lowest rate is better for everybody. The lowest rate gives you more scope, really at the end of the day. And so that's what they'll be working on.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Of course.
I don't have any questions, but thank you both for being here and we look forward to working together.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Moving on to closing items. Do we have any board member requests? Hearing none, moving over to future agenda items. Hearing none, we're moving on to adjournment at 6:46. I motion that we adjourn the meeting.
This is Carmen Trujillo. I'll second.
Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Ms. Erica De La Rosa,
Aye.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, our meeting adjourns and the next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, November 19th at 5:15 here at our district office. Thank you so much and have a